Hey guys, just wanted to give you an update on the Mission Whitetail podcast. Kevin Ackham will no longer be our co-host. We wish him all the best in his next endeavor. I'm going to be taking over the full hosting responsibilities, and we're looking forward to continue bringing some really good podcasts down the line. We may have another co-host at another time or some guy that joins us from time to time, but right now it's just going to be me, and we're really looking forward to a great season. Thanks, guys.
Hey guys, Joe Miles here with Osseo Gear. This is the Mission Whitetail podcast. We're going to be doing a deep dive into what it truly takes to kill these mature bucks. We're going to step outside the box and look at the why for gear, tactics, training, and more importantly, the mindset from over 35 years of chasing these magnificent animals all over North America. Thank you for following along, and welcome to Mission Whitetail.
All right, guys, welcome back, Mission Whitetail. We're going to be doing something a little bit different this go-round. We got Adam Hayes back with us. He was on 2 in the first year, and we're actually going to do a 3-part series. So we're going to get Adam Hayes overload. So y'all will be tired of Adam Hayes after the next month and a half, but when you get an opportunity to talk to guys that have been as successful as Adam has over the years and doing it truly how, if anybody put in, well, I don't know that that's the best way to say it, but people can do what you do. You don't own 5,000 acres in Iowa. You've got properties that most guys that are serious about it, if they put in enough work, can get into those type properties. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I've never owned my own property that I could actually hunt until the last couple of years. So,
yeah. So I mean, the point here is guys that are, looking to expand their travel, expand, thinking that getting a lease or getting out of state and going to hunt is impossible to obtain. It's not. It's very obtainable. Adam, we talked off screen a little bit about this, but you're going to kind of take us through your world, and I talk enough as it is. We're going to, turn kind of the microphone, if you will, over to you. And just access is something that I know you hear and I hear almost daily. How do you get access? Where does that start? How do you do that sort of thing? So if you don't mind, man, take us through kind of what you hunt, how you have access, and what your yearly schedule is, kind of how you go through getting new properties, the properties you have. And then once we go through that, maybe then we'll talk about how you set each one of them up and that sort of thing. What do you think about that?
I'm not sure I can remember all that, but
oh, don't worry. I've got questions, old boy. I'll come back with you in a hurry. So don't worry.
I can get it started.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously born and raised in Ohio. So I've been fortunate that, been able to grow up in a great state for killing big deer, and actually living in Licking County, Ohio, which I believe is still the #1 county in Ohio for Boone and Crockett bucks. But I'd heard at one time Ohio was the only state that had registered Boone and Crockett deer from every county. So it's tough to find a bad place in Ohio. Not that there's giant deer on every farm, but Ohio's about as good as it gets. I mean, I'm sure there's places where you can find the numbers, better numbers than Ohio has, but as far as quality goes, I don't think anybody's any better than Ohio. So obviously Ohio is kind of like my go-to every year, obviously. And for the last 20 years now, I've really been focusing here at home and in Illinois and Kansas. I met you and Chris Seymour and some of the guys that were involved with Team 200 and Dominant Bucks back in the day, and Whitetail Addictions before that with Lone Wolf, and been fortunate enough to maintain a good relationship with Chris for 20 years. And I've been going pretty much the same area, not the same farm, but I think Chris is probably up to what do you say, 6,000 or 7,000 acres he manages now.
Yep. 7,000 acres. Yep.
Yeah. He doesn't overhunt his stuff. And I don't go to the same farms every year, but, you know, being able to go back to, you know, same general area for that long, you know, you get to know the area, know where you want to be and that sort of thing. And it's kind of nice though that, you know, every few years I end up going to a new spot and learning a new area. And the spot I hunted last year was the first time I'd ever been there, which it was kind of a bust for me because we had big deer in there early and they left and they didn't show up until after season. So got some work to do there.
Yeah.
But that's kind of been the plan in Kansas, you know, just going back to that same area. And Chris runs a lot of cameras. You know, he knows where, you know, the deer are at least he knows what deer are on what farms. Let's put it that way.
All right,
You know?
let's dissect that for a minute because guys are, you know, some guys are going to know who Chris is and some guys aren't. So Chris Seymour is a buddy of mine and Adam's. Adam introduced me to him, 10, 12 years ago, probably, if not longer. And Chris was an outfitter or still is an outfitter, I guess. I don't know that he actively pursues guys to come and hunt with him. He's got a kind of a client base of truly guys that you and I have kind of put together over the years.
Yeah.
And he has 7,000 acres. And so that is, you know, number one is to find, and I will say, I have hunted with a lot of outfitters over the years, and it is deathly scary how burnt you can get hunting with outfitters. Yeah. I mean, to the point that there's one or two, especially in the whitetail space, that would be recommended or somebody that we would consider hunting with. Chris Seymour is one of those guys. So there is the ability to find an outfitter out of state that has good ground that you can get into, and he will have the farm, he will run some cameras, and he will turn you loose. So
yeah, that's why I like hunting with, you know, Chris, and why I've had or why I've enjoyed it for so long is because he gives you access to the property. He does try to maintain some kind of inventory on those properties through trail cameras, but you're pretty much on your own after that for scouting, setting your stands and hunting. I mean, he's not going to tell you, you know, you need to be in this stand at 5 o'clock and this is the deer that's going to show up. I mean, you're pretty much on your own. You got access to the property and somewhat of a general idea of what, you know, what could possibly show up as far as inventory goes.
Yeah. And that's right. So you kind of have the best of both worlds there, and it's a unique situation. You know, Chris and I have leased some farms together. We actually own a really small farm right now together. So he's just a great relationship that we've built over the years. And a lot of it, when you're traveling out of state, goes back to relationships, right? I mean, that's the main thing. So that I guess I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but Adam Hayes, you know, Kansas, a lifelong friend that is an outfitter that has 7,000 acres of property, and you have access to basically all of that property, or you can hunt different farms throughout what he has. So that would be a key for a guy looking to go out of state. Fair to say?
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely.
All right. Now let's go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, in the last 20 years, I think I've hunted, you know, just about every farm he's got. I don't think he has any properties that I really haven't hunted. Maybe some of his newer, smaller stuff.
All right, let's go back home for a minute. All right, you've hunted, like you said to begin with, Ohio forever. You know, that's your stomping grounds. What is your situation there now? Like, what do you have? I mean, you've got your home farm. Talk to us a little bit about that, how it's kind of set up, and then what else you'll be looking at and hunting in Ohio this year.
Yeah, so my own farm, it's a small piece, you know, I'm not able to afford a giant, you know, farm like I'd like to. So I think I got the next best thing where I've got a, you know, kind of a sanctuary that I butt up next to, which I can pull deer off of. And, you know, my backyard's basically a food plot and limited pressure around me. And, you know, this is my third year owning the farm. I haven't killed a deer here yet, but starting to see some good age structure. So got high hopes this year. And then I've kept a lease down south that, the one that you hunted this past year, that's had some, mega giants on it historically. And they're in the process of going from an old CRP program to a new one. So they're, burning and replanting stuff, and kind of a transition period right now down there. But it's a couple hundred acres of CRP along a river that just, like I said, over the last decade, I've had some giant deer either living on that farm or coming through. So that's kind of, my in my back pocket if something doesn't pan out here at home. So that's kind of my two options here in Ohio.
And then you do, I mean, we talked a little bit last year because that property, I did go in there and hunt, I guess the first 7 or 8 days of November, but you were at home looking around, poking around. You also do some, you hear about a big deer around home, and then you try and go get permission to get in and hunt him in some of these, what do you call them, metro parks or that butt up to those. And that used to be kind of your recipe for success, right?
Yeah, I killed a lot of my big deer early in my career around some of the metro parks in and around central Ohio and Columbus, which, most of that stuff's been developed, bought up by developers. And you obviously can't hunt it anymore, but, it's that urban stuff is getting to be really tough these days because there's not much of it left, and any of the good stuff, has either been bought or leased up. So that kind of stuff's kind of run its course.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm always got my ears open listening for a big buck sighting, and I try to follow up on every lead I ever get about a big deer because you just never know when it might pan out.
Yeah. All right, so that takes care of home. Now let's shift to Illinois, because it's Ohio, Kansas, Illinois, and that's kind of your focus and where you try and stay, I guess, committed.
Yeah, Illinois is kind of the same deal as Kansas, other than it's not owned by an outfitter. I went over there 20 some years ago for the first time, back when we were filming Skyline Camouflage Hunting the Horizon. That's really dating myself there, that how long ago that was. But we filmed a show out there, and I struck up a friendship with Farmer, and he's become one of my best friends in the world. He farms a few thousand acres, and me and his son are about the only ones that hunt it. We are surrounded by outfitters out there, so it's tough to get a deer past 4 years old. But over the years, had some really good deer out there to chase. I could have killed my fifth 200-inch deer over there, I think 3 or 4 years ago. Was chasing a 230-inch giant that had him at 10 yards one day and couldn't get it around the tree to get a shot at him. I killed a 187 over there a couple of years ago. Was chasing, a couple 190s last year. So I mean, it's just a great area, river bottom, farm ground, corn everywhere, corn and soybeans. It's whitetail heaven out there. And I've been lucky, like I said, to have a good friendship with those guys out there, and limited access on the farms that I hunt. Like I said, even though we're surrounded by the outfitters, but it's been that's been a pretty interesting process out there for the 20 years, because it's on a much bigger scale than what I'm used to at home. I'm used to hunting these little tiny woodlots at home and flat farm ground and more fence lines and CRP, and that's more big timber out there. So I kind of struggled with that at first, but I feel like I'm getting kind of dialed in with how to hunt it. After 20 years, I've figured some stuff out there, but I'm still learning. We really got dialed in with the food plots, managing, the properties. I spent a week over there this winter clearing some stuff out for more food plots. I spent a couple of days on a backhoe cleaning out old logging roads to be able to access, the farms better from one side to the next. So it's been neat to be able to have access and to hunt properties that big that I don't actually own, and still be able to treat it like I own it, you know,
Yeah.
to improve it, work on the habitat management. I know you had Bobby Worthington on the podcast here recently, and I just met Bobby this winter for the first time. I'd read all this stuff and spent some time with him at a trade show, and I picked up some stuff from him on hunting big woods deer. I mean, it's kind of funny, you know, he's really successful with what he does. And it was crazy how what he does is just the polar opposite of what I do. I mean, you couldn't be any different, but he's figured out a way to be really successful with what he does in his area, just like I have. And I mean, you're never too old to learn, you know, learn stuff about these deer, you know, learning new tactics, learning secrets about, you know, hunting big deer. You can never stop learning. And I've learned a lot from Bobby. I talked to him about it. Hopefully I'm going to be able to get him out to Illinois next winter and walk some properties with me.
Yeah. So he's expecting us in June. We got I know you got Bear coming up here shortly, but when you get home and get things settled in June, we're going to pick some dates and just go up there and stay for a couple of days. He said there's some cabins on a lake up there. We can get a little cabin and hang out with him. He's got 3,000 acres and it's all big woods. That he's gonna. He said he's gonna fatten us up. So he's a good guy, and you're right, man. He's got his recipe for success and stacking the deck. And his system is a cool system. But everybody doesn't have a rut funnel, right? You know, some guys have got access to bean fields early season, and that's all they have. Some guys have got only the only time they get deer is late season. So you've got to have, you know, all the tricks, right? Or you got to try to be well-rounded at all parts of the season, not just the October 25th to November 25th. So yeah, I mean, the tips and tricks that you pick up from different guys and checking your ego, we talk about that a lot. You know, ask questions, man. Everybody doesn't know everything.
No, and you can never stop learning, man. A wise man once said, "Wisdom is an endless pursuit." You know, you can never think you know it all. You know, I like I said, I'm 56. This was my 43rd hunting season, and you know, I was learning stuff this year from Bobby about, you know, hunting big woods. You know, more people that you meet in the industry, more successful people that you meet, more opportunity you have to pick up another little piece to the puzzle, man.
That's it, without a doubt. So back to your properties. Let's you know, obviously Illinois October 1st opener, Ohio September opener, Kansas September opener. Let's talk about how you set things up. What your plan is. Like I'm assuming, again, putting words in your mouth, you are thinking about some deer, either in Kansas, Illinois, or at home, that hopefully are still alive at this point. And you are putting a plan together now for how you're going to attack the season, how you're going to set up the different properties. Walk us through that, if you will, kind of how you're setting things up and how you're getting planned for the season.
Well, you know as well as I do, man, when it comes to trying to plan that stuff months or a year in advance, it's a strategic nightmare.
Yeah.
You know, it really is. You never know what's going to happen. I thought I had the greatest game plan going into season last year. And I mean, anything that could go wrong did go wrong. You know, deer disappearing on me. I just felt like I couldn't catch a break all season. And I didn't until, you know, the 2-minute warning. And, you know, January 13th, I finally drew back on a good buck. So, I mean, it's tough, but I mean, it's not like that every year.
Right.
You know, I depend a lot on cameras to let me know not only what deer are on the properties that I'm hunting, but, you know, when I'm actually going to be hunting them. As far as early season goes, you know what deer are going to be doing early season. You know, they're going to be in the beans, you know, in the food sources, kind of doing their thing until they, vanish and head back to their core areas and start getting reclusive. So, I kind of plan my season, accordingly to what's going on, for that time of the year. But really, the cameras really dictate, what's going on at the time and when I'm going to go there. So, I might say I'm planning on going to, Canada in early September, and then Kansas for the opener because it opens up before Ohio and Illinois, and then kind of, depending on if I got something really good at home showing up or in Illinois, might determine which of those two places that I hunt, end of September, early October. So early season, it helps with the states that I hunt. And that's kind of why I've stuck with that plan, is because they're kind of spaced out.
Yeah.
Because you've only got so much time to hunt and only so much what I would consider, optimum time for planning a hunt hundreds or 1,000 miles from home. So I've got them kind of spaced out for those openers, and then I'll just kind of go from there with what the cameras are telling me and what's on the farm. And anytime you got a big deer showing up in daylight, I mean, you've got to be able to take advantage of that and get aggressive and jump in there. And there's really no way to be prepared for that unless you're running cellular cameras. I mean, I really probably depend on those to a fault, but I mean, how else can you monitor 3 or 4 states, especially that far from home, without using cellular cameras? I don't have the money to hire somebody to watch deer for me, so
right.
the best thing is the cell cameras.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that is definitely something that we rely on absolutely heavily. And then I guess you kind of get out of the early season, if you will, and you get into the rut, and that's when, if you have that deer, it doesn't matter if it's Alberta, if it's Kansas, if it's Illinois, it's at home, whatever it is, that is the lockdown time when you go to that spot and hunt that deer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I guess if I had my choice, I would prefer hunting, early September, hunting, early to late October as opposed to November, because, my strategy has always really revolved around hunting a specific deer when they're really predictable and patternable. And most of that you can throw out the window in November, I mean, I know there's probably more big deer killed in November than any time of the year, but I would bet you if you looked at the numbers of how many of those deer were killed because the guy was hunting that specific animal, as opposed to just being in the woods and catching a big deer coming by, I would think that most of your guys killing big deer in November are not hunting that specific animal, for the majority, for the most part.
Yeah. Bobby and I were in Kentucky looking at a property, and it's got a unbelievable long range funnel. And what is meant by that is, you're going to have deer that you have pictures of, but through that long range funnel that connects those big woodlots for miles along a river, there's no telling what may come through there.
Yep.
I mean, a deer, and he was very adamant about that. The buck that you're after, it may be one, from 4 miles away that comes through here that's bigger that you've never seen. So yeah, I mean, it does definitely get tougher. Tougher is not the right word. I guess it gets tougher to kill the deer if you're after a particular deer after about the 7th of November.
Yeah. And for me, that's really what it's all about. I mean, I just enjoy, finding a specific animal, trying to figure that buck out and trying to kill that deer. And I would rather do that and take my chances in that scenario than, just go out in a stand in November in an area, just hoping, a big deer strolls by and I kill him. That's just not what it's about for me anymore. I just really enjoy that chase, and that specific animal, and playing the game with a deer that intimately and trying to beat him at his own game.
So are you are you really a bed guy? Like you're trying to find the beds? I mean, is that a big thing? Or are you just trying to find, I mean, we're kind of derailing the conversation a little bit, but heck, I want to ask it and we'll let it go where it takes us.
I think it's very important to know where a deer beds. Yeah. I mean, that's a huge piece to the puzzle, being able to find a deer's, core area or safe spot, where he spends the majority of his time. That's huge. I know, Andre has always been a big advocate of hunting a deer's bed. I won't hunt a deer's bedroom until it's the last resort, because I don't want that deer to know he's being hunted. And I think you've got, one, maybe two opportunities to dive into a buck's bedroom before he knows what's going on, and tipping him off. So I kind of use that as more of a last resort. And not to say though, like I said, it's very important to know where he's at. I mean, I want to know where that deer's at when I'm going into the woods, in the afternoons, not to jump them. And a lot of my strategy revolves around being close, to those bedding areas, because when deer big bucks are on a strict feeding pattern early and late before, the rut's influencing their activity, they're not moving a whole lot. So, I mean, you got to be right on top of them pretty much. And it's a fine line between being close enough that you can kill them and far enough away that you're not bumping them.
Yeah. And that's the strategy, right? And guys that are just getting new to this or just getting into it, you're going to screw up and you're going to blow them out. And that's that's actually a feather. That's a win. I mean, you lost that, but boy, you learned for the future.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very important piece of the puzzle, knowing where a big buck beds. Absolutely.
So it's funny you mentioned Andre. I did a post the other day about buck beds because I mean, it's always been a hot topic, but it seems like on social media, you got guys out every weekend right now finding these buck beds. And, I was talking about how depending on food and depending on what time of year it is, they're going to bed in different places. And so you find a bed in April, the chances of that being the same bed in September are not very good.
That's right.
And I made a post about that. It's just think about the why when you find a bed, think about why the deer's bedding there. And Andre was one of the first guys to comment and said, if you know where a big deer is bedded, that's 90% of the game. Find his bed, find where he's bedded. And if you're after that particular buck, that's the key to the puzzle.
Yeah. And we're just coming off the, best time of the year to find those buck beds. Late season is a great time to get out and scout and look for them. And, I've always kind of, focused on bucks' core areas and finding them, like I said, so I know where they're going to be in early season. Because if you think about it, it's not rocket science. If you think about October, what's a big buck doing? He shed his velvet a few weeks ago. He's going to be making rubs, and a big mature buck's going to be making really big rubs, but they're going to be rubbing a lot. And they're going to be in a safe area, which is usually some thick cover. So, I mean, you're looking for thick cover. You're looking for concentrations of rubs. And I believe the bigger, the better, and those kind of things are really easy to find, January, February, March, April, it's starting to green up a little bit, but great time to get out in the woods and look for those bedded areas and core areas. And that's the first thing I'm looking for. I'm looking for concentrations of rubs. The bigger, the better, in and around thick cover, or maybe it might be, a ridge line, some kind of security cover, where you're going to catch, a big deer bedding.
All right, let's get back on the farms and the access, and let's talk about anything you do in particular setting up your farms. Starting with, say, your home farm, with how it lays out, and then let's get into Illinois. I mean, Seymour's, we can talk a little bit about that, but I don't think we do much manipulation out there. But but is there anything that you do? I know you just went and did some food plot and some backhoe work and that sort of thing. But anything you can give the guys that is something you do particular on the places you have access to?
I'm beginning to realize that, the most important thing early season is food. So, whether it's soybeans, whether it's corn, whether it's, food plots, there's 20 different things that you could plant, for your early season food sources. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create areas close to where these bucks core areas are, where they're going to be bedding in October, where I can give them multiple things, multiple choices. I'm a really big believer in the clover, and I'm a big believer in imperial clover. I like to have that clover close to them. I like to have, my alfalfa mixed in there. I like to have soybeans that are still green. I plant my soybeans late to make sure they're still green for early season. There's a few states, mine included, like Ohio, where you can plant corn and you can strategically mow that stuff, in a specific area. And you kind of setting the trap and thinking about, okay, so if he lives here and I know this is his travel pattern, he normally shows up here, what can I plant right there that's going to be a prime food source for him, exactly what he wants, and maybe even 3 or 4 different types of his favorite food sources right there. I want that deer to have everything he could possibly want as far as food goes, right where he's normally moving at that time of the year. So I'm planting beans, I'm planting corn, clover, alfalfa. There's some spots where I'm planning on mowing the corn and then having, already kind of a double crop scenario where you've got some green coming up in the corn, like oats, which are really good, early season when that stuff just starts coming up. Rye, some different grains. But the big thing for me, like I said, is trying to have as many different things kind of peaking at that time of the year as far as a food source goes. So no matter what that buck wants, I've got 3 or 4 different options for him right there in his travel pattern, and kind of setting the stage for that early season, based on the food sources.
And Adam, you want to kill that deer as quickly as possible. But a lot of times those bigger deer, even when the season comes in early, have because, correct me if I'm wrong, but Ohio's like the second Saturday in September. Is that right?
Last Saturday of September.
Last Saturday in September. So a lot of times velvet's gone. They're already making a move. So you may still, have an opportunity there, on that early summer feeding pattern, but it could still be October 25th, 28th, when he's starting to feel a little bit, ruddy, that he's still on that pattern. But the problem you run into is that he might not be coming to that food source until after dark.
Very possible. Yeah, very possible. That's why I want those food sources to be as close to his, core area or bedding area as possible. I mean,
so that would be, that's really a Don Higgins strategy. That's kind of his thing, is as well as a lot of food, a lot of different food, having a sanctuary, if you will, bedding area, or knowing where that is, and then killing them in between the two on the way to, so you can get in and out without really exposing what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, you can build the perfect mousetrap, and have exactly what they want, there to feed. But if he's not coming there before dark, you're out of the game. And I think there's a couple things, a couple steps beyond just planning that stuff that you've got to think about. And the big one is wind direction. If you know where a buck beds and where he's going to be going to feed, what wind direction he's going to need to feel safe enough to get up before dark to head to that food source. So you need to be thinking about that ahead of the game too. You need to be thinking about what's the wind direction going to be doing? What wind is he going to need blowing in his face? So if he feels comfortable enough to get up before dark to head that way, and where can you set up along that travel pattern where you can be within bow range of him while he's using the wind to his advantage? You know, if you have a predominantly southwest wind in your area and you're expecting a deer to come to your food plot, you know, with the wind at his back, you know, it's probably not going to happen. You know,
Right.
You need to be thinking about that stuff. You know, I've seen this happen so many times where guys set food plots up in areas that they can't even hunt because of the wind. You got to be looking at, you know, where's the best tree in this area that I can hunt out of, and how can I manipulate this area with the wind that this deer is going to need? I mean, there's so many things that go into it, well beyond just having what these deer need. Because, like you said, if he's not coming there before dark, you're not going to kill him.
Yeah, that's right.
So what series of events is it going to take for that deer to get up and move in daylight to come to that food source, and how can you take advantage of it?
Yeah. And that, you know, I think that's going to segue us right into something you and I were talking about off air, and that's going to be our episode 2 with you, but we can go ahead and kind of tee that up. Let's, you know, the other factors, you know, the wind, you know, when you're setting up these food plots, you know, I'm not going to beat this up too bad, but, you know, guys talk about, you know, hey, this is a great spot to put a food plot in, but you got to think about that and how he's going to get there. Exactly what you just said, for the wind, but then the moon. You know, we talked about this a little bit off air, and that's going to be our whole next segment is on the moon and the Deer Hunter's Moon Guide and everything behind that. But not only should guys be looking at the moon for planning out of state hunts, but also you know, when to hunt those traps, those mouse traps that they have set up.
Yeah, because there's multiple factors, you know, that's going to make a big buck get up and move early, you know, whether it's the moon, whether it's the weather, whether it's the wind, you know, all those factors, you know, can get deer up to move a little bit early. You know, I think really the key to it is when you can combine multiple factors on the same night, you know, and stay out of these spots, man. Go through so much effort and work and money to build the perfect mouse trap, and then you screw it up by going in there before everything's lined up and you've stacked the deck in your favor. You know, I tell guys all the time, the toughest part of hunting big deer normally is not hunting them until everything's right. Don't go in there and screw it up. You know, let everybody else screw their areas up, push the deer in. Don't tip these deer off before you go in, because every time you go into this area and you don't kill him, the game gets tougher and tougher and tougher, because he's going to end up picking up on something. He's going to catch you, you know, heading back to your truck after dark, you know, catch, you know, a glimpse of your flashlight, catch some scent you leave behind, hear you walking out. I mean, you know, the game just gets tougher every time that you go in and don't get it done. And I'm not trying to, you know, convince guys not to hunt. Just stay out of your best area until, you know, that you got the deck stacked in your favor, because who's going to argue with the fact that the best time to hunt a spot is the first time you go in?
Yeah.
So do everything you can to make that spot as good as you can. Know what you need. You know, Andre put it perfectly. You know, you go in and surgically remove them from the face of the earth one time. You know, you don't go in, you know, 5 or 6 times for a heart surgery. You go in and you get it done the first time. And that's the way you got to look at it.
So, guys, we're going to cut this one off right now, and then we're going to come back for episode 2 with Adam Hayes. And that's going to be all about the moon. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to be the devil's advocate. Adam and I talked about this, and I'm going to ask all the questions. So, guys,
back to my cage fighting. So,
yeah, that's right. We're going to have to get Dana White to referee this bad boy. So, guys, that'll be our next one. We're just going to go quiet here for a second and then get going again.